Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rapid Chess Championship match between Arjun Erigaisi and the Russian Grandmaster Alexey Sarana. This is going to be an exciting contest. Sarana has been incredibly fast. He's a very strong player. He's rated about 2650, and he's a regular at the top finishes in all the different speed chess championships, the Title Tuesday, the Rapid Chess Championship. Meanwhile, Arjun has qualified to the knockouts of the Rapid Chess Championship for the very first time. This is the first time that Arjun has managed to get here. He had attempted it about two or three times before, but he was not successful in making it. But for the very first time, he is here. And for the very first time in the last 5 weeks, Vidit has missed out from the qualification. Vidit was a regular. He qualified four times in a row. He managed to reach the knockouts. Uh, to explain the format, Rapid Chess Championship is a very strong open event. Open, but it was only open for the top 100 players. And Vidit qualified for you have to get into the top eight in order to get into the knockouts. Vidit managed to do that successfully for the four times in a row. He lost the first three times in the quarterfinals itself. The first time against Alexander Grishchuk, the second time against um, Jeffrey Chong, and the third time against Hikaru Nakamura. But this time, the previous week, he made it till the semi-final by successfully defeating. I don't exactly remember who he defeated, but he defeated someone. Yeah, he defeated Sam Sevian. He defeated Sam Sevian, who had put on a monstrous show himself in the qualification phase with the best score in the history of Rapid Chess Championship. Vedit managed to defeat him and played a brilliant match against Hikaru Nakamura, but just lost on time in the semi-final portion, in the bullet portion of the Rapid Chess Championship, and lost that. And from this week onwards, the Rapid Chess Championship was opened not only to the top 100 grandmasters, but to all the grandmasters, any grandmaster, regardless of the rank. So, an exciting contest, and Arjun managed to qualify for the very first time. It's a funny backstory, We are in the camp with the Indian team out here, and just before the matches, just before the tournament yesterday, there was a bit of a contest. We had some kind of a competition, and with it was just acing through it, and doing questions after questions, solving it exactly with a perfect score. And Arjun was desperately trying to catch him, but he wasn't able to. And then I just told Arjun that, okay, you can get your revenge in the Rapid Chess Championship. And he was like, yes, yes, I'll do it. And he managed to qualify for the Rapid Chess Championship knockout for the very first time. That has been how phenomenal these guys are, how amazing these guys are. And there we see Arjun on the screen, waiting to play, raring to go. He's been preparing for the match today psychologically for the last few minutes. The match hasn't yet begun. We're just waiting for it. Meanwhile, Hikaru had a phenomenal win, come from behind win against Botnik in the other quarterfinal. Jeffrey Chong defeated Amin Tabatabai, so they are through to the semis. And Dimitri Andreikin defeated Jose Eduardo to reach the semi-final. These are the other semi-finalists, and there we have it. The Arjun game has begun, and he's gone with a Jobawa London. This is truly exciting, guys. D4, knight f6, knight c3, d5, bishop f4. These were Arjun's first three moves, the Jobawa London, which has also been championed a lot by Hans Niemann, who could potentially be his opponent in the Junior Speed Chess Championship. And knight b5, knight a6, e3, c6, knight c3, bishop b4, bishop into a6, b into a6. This was opening. Black has got the structural weakness, but white has lost his light square bishop. Knight f3, a5, short castle, bishop a6. These guys are playing super fast. So we'll quickly go to the live position, which is on the board right now. Bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, and here we have it. This is the position. It looks pretty even out there. Bishop e7 on the board, knight e5, and now rook c8, knight a4, going for the c5 square. Look at that speed, guys. The format is 10 minutes plus 2 seconds increment. in the rapid portion. If this becomes a draw, then it goes to a 3+2 blitz. If that becomes a draw, then it goes into a 1+1 bullet. And finally, if that's also a draw, then it goes into an Armageddon. Traditionally, in chess, knockouts have always been consisted of two games, but this is a single game elimination. One game, one bad game, one loss, you're out. You have no chance for a comeback. Arjun has the white pieces because he finished higher in the qualification phase than Alexey Sarana, and therefore here he is with the white pieces, 94. He has more than 10 minutes. It's this amazing speed of Arjun, which is one of his biggest assets. He's very fast, but sometimes that also works both ways. It's a double-edged sword. Queen C7 played by Sarana. The computer doesn't like this. A lot depends on trying to get this pawn to C5 in these kind of positions because black's pawn structure is bad. A7, E5, C6. This leaves a hole on the C5 point, and if white can get one of his knights out there and defend it with another piece, because you don't want to put the knight here and after bishop into c5, d into c5, place it with a pawn, because when you place a pawn on that square, it doesn't control it. So Arjun puts his knight onto d3, he'll get this other knight onto c5, and this bishop will potentially go to g3 to control this b8 square, the open file that black has, which can be used by the rook. So knight d3 on the board, and I don't see a clear way for black to prevent this knight from coming onto c5, because if you play something like knight to e4, then after bishop at e7, queen at e7, this bishop doesn't control the c5 square. So he goes for bishop b5. White is set to go for knight c5, and there he has it. So white has achieved a bit of a strategic edge with this move. He has captured an important spot. He has better pawn structure, and black's counterplay is not immediately apparent here. Meanwhile, chat, do hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, so more people can come in and support Arjun through this. Also, do let us know your predictions for this match. Will Arjun win this? Do you think Sarana is the favorite? If you think Arjun is going to get this, do you think he's going to do this in the rapid portion, the blitz portion, the bullet portion, bishop into d3 taken? How do you think white should capture back here? This is a fundamental strategic question. Arjun seems to be thinking quite a bit over this. I'm a bit surprised, but I can understand that he was probably considering the recapture with the c pawn so as to open the c file. But he decides to go with the knight. Knight takes d3, which is what I thought he would do, because you would generally not want to allow bishop into c5 and d into c5 in this position. So knight into d3 played, and knight to e4 played. Bishop at e7, queen at e7, rook c1, trying to get this pawn to c4, preventing black from playing c5. If black plays c5 here, white can go f3, c4, f into e4, c into d3, c into d3. At the end of it, white would be a pawn up, and you don't want black wants to play c5 because black wouldn't want to allow this knight onto c5 to sit here, because in that case that would just make this c6 pawn a weakness for the future. At the moment, it's not so easily attackable, but white will prepare it. He will open the c file, open access to the rook, and hit the c6 pawn sooner or later. Are Arjun and Srinath in the same building? What's your best guess, Rohit? Bullet and rapid. Yes, that's Arjun kind of plays bullet everywhere. Yeah, c5 and f3 on the board. Now I expect c4, f into e3, c into d3. Sarana is also pretty fast, by the way. He's incredibly fast. But so far in this game, Arjun is faster because he just knew the opening a bit better. And that helped him get this gain this extra 2 minutes on the clock. He is pondering on how to recapture now. But he has two options. One is with the queen, the other with the pawn. Yeah, he takes with the pawn, and he takes with the pawn again. Queen b7, attacking both the e4 pawn and the b2 pawn simultaneously. And Arjun has only one way to defend these two pawns simultaneously, and he cannot do it in this move right away. So he has to take rook into c8. Sarana will recapture back. There he goes. And Arjun will play the queen to b1, defending both the b2 pawn and the e4 pawn simultaneously. So uh, the pawns are all protected. The Arjun is a pawn up. He has a 2-minute lead. Chat, what do you guys think? Is Arjun going to be able to convert this? Or is Alexey Sarana going to strike back here? This is a very interesting question between two players of such high strength. It's usually a question of how well you convert slightly better positions versus how well you defend bad positions. There's a very important point of difference between two incredibly strong players, about 2650 in general. And this is one of the reasons why Hikaru excels so brilliantly in speeches events. He is so amazing at resisting bad positions. He gets into bad positions so often, but he goes on about it as if the position isn't bad at all. The one of the fundamental differences, he doesn't feel bad about having a bad position, which is what most other people do. When they have a bad position, they're like, oh my God, why did I get into this? What did I do? I should have done this better. I should have done that better. Uh, I'm sure that I'm not. Is this relatable only to the chess players or people off chess as well? Most of the time is spent thinking about how we got into that bad situation. But I think Hikaru recovers a lot faster. Yes, he also cusses and takes a bit of time, talks about how he's having this horrible day, how he's throwing it away. But 10 seconds later, he finds this amazing defense, which poses problem for the opponent. And 120 seconds later, the game is a draw. He's just he has mind blowing chess skills, but also he has a method that works really well for him, even amongst those who are equal to his strength. Meanwhile, back to the game, Queen b5 played by Alexey Sarana, and it's a it's not easy for Arjun to improve his position now. The queen is bound to the b2 pawn. If he plays something like rook to c1, try and capture the c5 and trade more pieces, go into the endgame, because that's what we are taught, right? When you're ahead in material, exchange pieces. But here the problem is rook c1, black will capture queen into c1, and then this queen comes to d3. It comes deep into white's enemy territory, white's territory, and attacks all these pawns. So it won't be possible to move this queen. It won't be possible to bring the king. It will be some kind of an impasse. He goes for rook c1. He probably thinks rook into c1, queen into c1, queen d3, this pawn to e5, and all his pawns are protected for the moment. And yes, they are protected for the moment, but it it's not just for this moment. And I mean, the game goes on after queen d3, e5, and I think black will just put his king on h7 and have a pretty strong counter play against this. So I think after rook c1, there is a higher chance of this game ending in a draw rather than white winning. I think black has a bit of an upper hand, but you still never know, because practically it's white who's pushing, with black who's defending. The pressure has been created, and once you create a pressure, it's a percentage thing. There's a percentage of chance that the opponent will collapse under the pressure, and there's a percentage that they will hold steady and make this draw. So when you create enough of that pressure, when you create enough of that chances, at some point it's going to go your way, but never 100%. Even though it was one of the questions from Arjun in the camp, why you cannot convert 100 out of 100 times. Why can't you do it? But that's just how the nature of chess is. You you can sometimes be a piece up and it still ends in a draw because you cannot mate with a single knight or a single bishop. Sometimes you can be two pieces up and you still can't win if you have two knights. So the drawing tendency, the defensive potential is very high, which is why a lot of chess games, especially at the higher level, end in a draw, because the level of defense is very high. Now, what has Sarana done is he's put this queen on e2. So this queen is watching over both b2 and e3, and he's just going to put his king to safety on g7, protect his king from all these checks from the queen, so that there are no checks. And then after that, Sarana will just sit and keep moving back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, maintain his position, hold his position. Meanwhile, white has no way to improve here. This queen cannot go past this border. it's bound to the protection of E3 and B2 for its lifetime. Either that or it has to sacrifice one of these pawns, which is a very sad thing to do considering both of them are from the same team, the queen and the pawn. So won't be an easy decision for the queen to do. And if the queen has to do that, then there has to be some kind of a greater gain. But black will also have an equal amount of gains. For instance, queen c5, queen into b2, queen into a7, queen into a3, and black will end up having this dangerous a pass pawn. So there's no way to improve. Queen c3, now you see this back and forth movement from black, king to g6, king to g7, king to g6, king to g7. This queen will stay on e2, it will stay there holding that defensive posture and not allowing this white queen to move away. Also, another defensive idea for black. Black just takes this pawn on e3, queen f4 check, queen c1 check, and there is a perpetual any time. So uh, even if you like, for example, as white get these two pawns, if you lose this pawn, then queen f4, queen c1 makes a draw. Meanwhile, there's a poll out on the channel, guys. Will Arjun qualify to the semis? I voted for, of course. And if you think so, do vote for it as well. Or if it looks difficult, well, you can vote for that too. And do hit that like button, guys. We have 400 people watching and just 120 likes. Let's get those likes going so more people come in and show that support to Arjun, who has gone into a long thing because he's not able to find a way to improve. But there is one option for white to keep the game going, guys. White has this move d5, which is probably what Arjun is calculating. d5, a into d5, queen c6 check. And with checks, you start entering the black king's territory without losing your e3 pawn. Black doesn't have time to capture the e3 pawn because it checks all the way. Queen to c6, queen to f6, e6. So white queen can actually manage to escape its bondage to the pawns by creating this opportunity to check the black king with a tempo. For this, you have to start with d5. It starts with a sacrifice. All great things in life require a bit of sacrifices. So d5, a into d5, queen to c6 check, and this king has to move to a safe square because if you move forward, it works for Abish Matthew. At this level, it's not as easy. Queen c6 check, queen f6 check, and this pawn on e5 will become very dangerous if the f7 pawn falls. So you have to go back with the king. Yes, he's got d5 on the board, and he has to go back after e into d5, which he kind of has to do because if he doesn't, then this pawn will just advance forward. Just ignore the e6 pawn and advance forward. So black has to take a into d5 and queen c6 check, king to g7, queen to f6 check. The king has to probably go to g8 because you don't want to lose the f7 pawn at any cost. And now white has options like e6 and to burst open its way to the black's king. So let's just put it on the board. Into d5, queen c6 check. King has to go to g7 because if you go to f5, then after queen f6 check, king e4. And now after queen into f7, this king is too exposed and this pawn is a passer. You can take this back, but then white will take a7 and e3 is defended. Queen into b2 is not possible because of queen g7 check. So he has to, after queen c6 check, the black king has to go back. You have to defend f7 at any cost because if the f7 pawn falls, for instance, something like this, then this pawn on e5 queens really quickly in just 3 moves. So queen f6 check, the king goes to g8, and out here white will potentially have something like e6. This is one way of breaking things open. F into e6, queen g6 check. You can take this pawn with a check, or you can take this pawn with a check because on both h8 and f8, it's checking squares for the white queen. So after d5, Sarana is still in thought because now things look difficult for him. How many rapid games these two will play? Again, the format, it's only one game, guys. It's a single game elimination format. So if Arjun wins this, he will qualify directly to the semis and he will face Grandmaster DMITRY ANDREIKIN. If this is a draw, It goes into a blitz playoff. Oh, meanwhile we have e into d5 on the board. Queen c6 check also on the board, and I guess the black king has to go to g7. Now there's some real pressure, guys, because the position is bad and black is also dangerously low on time. So this is when such strong people make mistakes. When you reach the point where it you have to make difficult defense and you just don't have time. That's when that's when the defense becomes impossible against players of such level. So queen to c6 check. I guess the king has no way but to go to g7. Queen to f6 check. The king has to go to g8. And now I expect e6. Yeah, e6 played instantly by Arjun. F into e6, and now he has to take a decision. Does he want to take this pawn? Does he want to take this pawn? This is not an easy decision to make, guys. It's incredibly hard. But I think I would take the g5 pawn because then I would create these passed pawns on the corner. Whereas if I take the central pawns, I don't have any passed pawns. And in any games, having a passed pawn is very important. So this variation, black takes the e3 pawn. There is no passed pawn. So he goes for it. He goes for queen g6 check. Uh, he takes this pawn, queen into b2, queen f4 check. He will take this a4 pawn as well. Arjun, well, sometimes being greedy is a good thing. So he takes this pawn, he protects the a3 pawn, and then he has to reach a point where he starts advancing this pawn whilst protecting his king from any possible perpetual checks. King to g6, yes, take this a4 pawn. I expect that to happen pretty quickly from Arjun. Or maybe he will insert a few checks just to, gain a few more seconds, have some fun, and make black think a bit. Just to show an illustration, a pawn endgame like this is probably winning for white because white will have these two pawns and black has only this one pass pawn, and this king is in time to catch this pawn. So I guess this should be winning, or it looks winning. The computer says there is a way to make a draw with this, but when queen g4 check, king f6 on the board, really curious to see if Arjun will play queen d4 check because the pawn end game really looked winning for me at first sight. So it would be totally understandable if he does this, and then if his opponent is able to find this brilliant defense that we just saw. On the other hand, a pawn end game like this should be winning for sure. There is no defense because this a pawn cannot just queen. That was the defense we saw in the previous example, the previous variation, but here it cannot happen. So maybe Arjun, he has to take this pawn first and then look for a queen exchange. But queen d4 check looks super tempting and he has gone for it. He has gone for it, probably thinking that this pawn endgame is winning. And maybe it is winning. Maybe king g1 was the mistake. He should go for g4. The computer here shows that white is just winning here with g4 and king g2. Black doesn't have enough time to take this pawn, and this king catches this pawn easily. I think this shouldn't be difficult to calculate for Arjun. He should be able to see g4. It's also the most natural move. I made king g1 because I was trying to show this difference between two passed pawns and one passed pawn. But really, g4 is the most natural move. And Arjun, he goes for h4. This is very interesting. h4, d4. The king comes running to save this pawn. And then somehow, black is able to draw this endgame. King c4. It doesn't look like a draw, guys. It looks like white is winning here. It looks like white is winning, and I'm able to see that it's a draw only because the computer is showing 0.00, and I know that it's a draw. Apparently, this is a draw because king b3, the threat is king c2, and this pawn advances. So you have to go some square where you cover the c2 pawn, king into a3, h5, king b3, and now this pawn is just in time. So h4 on the board, Sarana has 30 seconds, and he has 30 seconds to try and find this draw, which is not easy. It's not apparent, but it's possible to find practically because it's pretty much the only way there is to do something for Sarana here. He has to make these natural moves. Like he has to make d4. You wouldn't resign in this position. Then white will move his king. And then after, oh, he goes king f4. Okay, he goes king f4. Guys, this is what happens when you get when you have engine in front of you. You just lose touch with the practicality of things. So it just looks so far-fetched, this king d5, king c4, king b3. You can find these things in a classical game if you have a lot of time and you have time to calculate. But when you're just playing with your instinct, it looks so far-fetched that this can work. And for white now, the way to defend is he has to just bring his king onto d1, and these pawns will take care by themselves, because king g5, g4, for example, white cannot capture this because this pawn runs all the way. So these pawns, they are independent. They are like, grown-up children. They can take care of themselves. And this king's only job is to protect, to save these d pawn. I mean, to prevent this d pawn from queening. So king g1, king e3, king f1, king d2 played. And now this pawn runs. This pawn also runs. But white is faster. White is faster. And queen d4, and it's game over, guys. Arjun has won this. He's through to the semi-final of the Rapid Chess Championship. Yes, Queen C8 check, King E2, and there we go. Arjun has won against Alexey Sarana. He moves on to the semi-finals against Grandmaster DMITRY ANDREIKIN, who is again a very strong player, rated about 2700. And we were just mentioning a day ago about how strong ANDREIKIN is, and ANDREIKIN generally has a very good score against Arjun in the chess.com events. I hope ANDREIKIN is not watching this, because we wouldn't want him to have that extra boost of confidence. But pretty sure he's not looking at this channel. But guys, you are looking at this. Do hit that like button. Arjun OP in the chat. Let's go. Let's go for the semi-final. Let's get in greater numbers and see that Arjun manages to reach the final, where he will likely play a swashbuckling final against Hikaru Nakamura. I think that's the expectation here, guys. Let's see. Yeah. Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be quickly back after a short break, and we'll be back for the semifinals against Arjun against DMITRY ANDREIKIN. Meanwhile, do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and stay tuned. We'll be back in just about 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the semifinals of the Rapid Chess Championship. We have Jeffrey Chong playing against Hikaru Nakamura, two of the strongest American players. And Hikaru has been virtually unbeatable in all of these features events, all of these events hosted by chess.com. That when chess.com announced the Global Chess Championship, people were joking that it's just another event for Hikaru to win and finally become the world champion. Hikaru has been unbeatable, but Rapid Chess Championship hasn't been one such event. Here, he hasn't had a 100% record. In fact, he has been winning quite rarely. He did win the previous week, but not without going through a lot of struggle. He couldn't win the week before that, being knocked out by the world rapid champion Abdusatro Nodebak. And Abdusatro has in fact beaten Hikaru two times. Abdusatro is someone who's close to the age of Arjun, Nihal, and all our lovely young prodigies. Gukesh. Okay, Gukesh is far younger than all these other kids, so we won't bring him into this. He's the youngest among these young kids. But Abdusatro is close to that age, and he's beaten Hikaru two times in the knockout stage of the Rapid Chess Championship. So, guys, in this tree, if Hikaru wins, he goes to the final, and then Arjun plays against Andreikin. So, who knows? We could be seeing a potential Arjun Hikaru final on this night tonight. The game has started, and it's a pretty nice cushion for white actually. Again, we were again talking recently about how Hikaru is one of the best at defending worst questions, and then someone asked, "Oh, but is he better than Magnus at it?" And then we were like, but Magnus simply doesn't get so many bad questions. So yes, Hikaru is better at defending bad questions because he just gets them so often. He doesn't get a lot of time to study and prepare openings like your typical professional chess player. Clearly, he's not participating in camps like this, and instead he spends that time streaming, which which sometimes gives them more bad questions out of the opening, but also gives them that skill to fight his way out of it. And this is such a nice question here for white. He has the C file open. If you look at the structure from the white's perspective, this is actually the reverse of the Sicilian dragon, which starts from the 1e4 c5 move order. Just to take a little detour, this is known as the Sicilian dragon, not because Khaleesi played it, but because of the way this pawn structure looks. Apparently, it looks similar to a dragon's tail. I don't know whose imagination was it, when was this, but these opening names were invented before I was born. So this is Sicilian dragon, and this is the way it is. And let's get back and look at the structure we have right now. It's basically the exact mirror image of this one, except that it's from the wide side. And in these structures, uh, going back to the live position, knight c5, pawn on c6. In these types of structures, this bishop tends to be very strong, and there is a very strong pressure on this b7 point, which is again very similar to another amazing opening. In fact, one of the best openings ever, the Catalan opening, this bishop on g2, always putting pressure on this knight on b7, literally breathing fire like a dragon. This bishop on b2 also a lot of air around, a lot of space around, and fantastically placed. But Hikaru doesn't bother about those things. He just removes his knight out of the way with knight e7 here. And after knight c5 plays c6, blunting this bishop, being like, okay, you have a nice bishop, but what are you going to do about it? I'm just going to close it out. So he goes c6, e4, bishop g4, f3. The point is, white wants to try and get this break with f4. He's like, okay, you have blunted one of my bishops, but I have two bishops. So you can block one. I'm going to open up another, the b2 bishop. So he's preparing to play f4. After f4, f5 would be a threat. So black would be kind of compelled to capture the f4 pawn, f4 into f4, g into f4. And with the threat of f5, the bishop on b2 opened up. This rook on g1 can potentially come into the play later after the bishop gets opened up. So after f4, it looks very promising for white again. Now, Hikaru has already pulled a rabbit out of the hat in the quarterfinal. He had a magnificent escape against Botnik Alexander, who is not a pushover and speeches himself. He's one of the fastest players around, one of the best bullet players. He would figure in the top 10 in chess.com in the top rankings. He's one of the most dangerous opponents and one of the most high rated opponents, someone who maintains the rating consistently. Hikaru managed to come from behind and beat him in the quarterfinals, and he did the same to Vidit in the previous week. So he has a habit of doing these things. He has a habit of pulling himself out of bad positions. E takes f4, g takes f4, f5, and black is preventing this f pawn from going to f5. He's blockading it, and he's also trying to provoke white from playing provoke white towards playing e5. So both his bishops get blocked. Of course, Jeffrey is not going to fall for that. He will try to bring his rook onto the g file. Two paths. One is rook f3, rook g3. The other path is king h1 and rook g1. King h1, rook g1 a bit slower, but the rook would be safer there. He goes king h1, and one thing that white would have to watch out is this f4 pawn, which is being watched by the black bishop on d6. So if he gets too excited and moves the rook at a moment where the f4 pawn is not adequately defended, then it would fall. Queen to f7, and queen d2 is an option. Queen f3 is an option. You have to defend the f4 pawn first, and then move this rook to g1 and this g7 square. So this is one of the ways white can create a threat. And from d2, this queen can come to c3, for example, increase the firepower required to bombard the g7 point. So g7 is like this fort right now. White has to go with all his major powers, all his artilleries, and exert pressure on g7 point. He does this by clearing this bishop out. He plays bishop h3, trying to do it with a tempo. So now, this rook on g1 can come there in one move. But I would have preferred to play something like queen d2 first. I would have liked to start with queen d2 or queen c2, and had this option of getting this queen onto the c3 square. But it's not what the computer ordered, and probably it's too slow for some reason. So bishop to h3, and the difficulties continue for Hikaru. Bishop is on h3. The queen can come to h6, but just queen f3. And I guess black's counterplay has to be mostly centered around this f4 pawn. But guys, look at how Hikaru always has more time than his opponent. Yes, he gets bad positions, but he never gets low on time. And that's an amazing thing about Hikaru. It's not something he does consciously, by the way. It's just all these years of practice. He started playing online speeches much younger than most people. Yes, the Arjun Sarana match is over, and Arjun won that, and he's through to the semis. He's he's playing against DMITRY ANDREIKIN, so stay tuned for that. Meanwhile, Hikaru is trying to march towards the final, but it's not going to be so easy, guys. It's not easy against Jeffrey Chong, who is who I think he was one of the best juniors. Uh, I think he just became 20 years old pretty recently. No longer a junior. I think he became 21 years old pretty recently. No longer a junior, and now Hikaru's time is catching up with Jeffrey Chong's. So, guys, that's some serious messaging there, serious posturing. If Hikaru's time is going below Jeffrey's, then his position is actually difficult to make a move. It's not easy for Hikaru to be able to find a move here. That's when he goes lower on time. He takes a long time, finds queen h6. I guess white can go queen f3. Bishop takes f4, queen takes f4, queen h3, and queen e5. This should be game over. Oh wait, it's not queen e5. It's rook g1 and queen c7. But either way, on g7 there's a finish. Queen h6, and Jeffrey goes rook g1 directly, which is actually which plunges the game into chaos. And even the computer has a hard time deciding whether to go this side or that side. Rook g1, the move White just throws the kitchen sink, and it's a move I completely didn't expect. Queen into h3, rook into g7 check. The king goes to f8, and I actually don't see what's happening here. Why is this? So rook to g3 possibly, you know, getting all these pieces onto the g file. But did white really have to do this? Couldn't white have done this whole thing without sacrificing a piece? And Hikaru would, of course, take queen into h3 because all other moves would, you know, would just give white a free pass, a free attack without the piece. So Rook G1. Oh, meanwhile, shout out to International Master Siddhant Mohapatra, who is in the chat, and all the other regulars. And guys, do hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let's get that support going before the Arjun match starts. Queen h3 taken, rook into g7 check, king f8 is what I expect. Maybe you can insert some rook g3 in between, and do the same thing. But eventually, we are going to reach this position. And now, what is the question? Not so clear how white is going to continue here. But eventually, you want to get these pieces: queen to b3, rook to g1, and the computer hates queen b3 because is there there's more knight d5 into d5, rook e2, and there's no defense against this. So computer hates it, but queen b3 is maybe what, maybe what. Oh, look, guys! This actually happened. Queen b3 check, knight d5 on the board, e into d5, and now rook e2 potentially incoming. Look at how the game has changed, guys. Look at how the game has changed. Hikaru didn't even have to do anything. He just didn't collapse against White's better position and kept making good moves, which uh, provokes mistakes. If you keep making good moves, your opponent is likely to slip up sooner or later, unless your opponent is Hikaru. So he kept making these moves. He kept playing moves like queen h6, which made the conversion difficult. And Jeffrey has slipped up into d5. Rook e2 also on the board, guys. And now it's black who has the initiative. Because how do you defend against this threat? You can do it with rook g2, but rook into g2, king into g2, and just bishop into f4. And the c1 rook is attacked. The h2 pawn is attacked, and it's just bad. You can do the same with rook into g7 check, king f8, rook g2, but it also comes to the same problem. Sooner or later, bishop into f4, and everything is hanging. Everything for white. The variation continues: queen c3, queen into h2, king f1, queen h3 check, and there is a hunt against the white king, and it doesn't look good for white. So Jeffrey in trouble here. He takes another pawn, king f8. He'll potentially take this bishop into g7 check, king e7, and after this, there are no more checks to give. So, very curious to see what Jeffrey would be thinking here. Meanwhile, Hikaru is like, okay, Hikaru is literally like in this pose. Calm, composed, and knows that he has a better position. Bishop into g7 check, king e7, and then I guess Jeffrey has to kind of give up a piece. Bishop f6 check, king f6, and Hikaru seems set to go for the final, the the semi-final between Arjun and the semi-final between Arjun and Andreikin will take place just after the match, just after this match. It will take place in about 5 minutes or so. So stay tuned, guys, for that. But let's first see how this goes. Jeffrey has had a long think here. He goes for bishop into g7. I expect Hikaru to come king e7. Bishop f6 check is maybe the only way for white to not get mated. You have to distract this queen somehow from out here. So bishop f6 check. If black takes king f6, then after queen c3 check, you start having your own checks. So the only way out is distracting this queen. But this is only temporary. And sooner or later, Black queen is going to get back here and go for an assault against the h2 pawn. So yeah, Hikaru is completely winning and he's turned it around. What an amazing game by Hikaru. Once again, such a bad push out opening, a bad push in general. He kept making decent moves, and his opponent was the first to blink. He's just a master. It's not easy to emulate though. I have watched Hikaru quite a few times, and I'm like, oh my god, I want to play this. I'm going to play like Hikaru, and then I go on my next stream. I try to play like him, and then I lose like 50 points because there's a big difference between uh, practice and not having that practice. He's worked so many hours on this. He spent so much time, and that's the result of all that. Oh, I mean, that's why he's so strong. Bishop f6 check on the board. Queen f6, rook g1. The threat is rook g7 check. So there is still some fight left in black's position. Queen h4, rook g7 check, king d8, queen g8 check, rook e8. There's still some fight left, and if you can defend against this h2 point, white still has some attacking potential. But black can stop this with rook f8, rook g7, rook f7, and white just doesn't have enough counterplay. So I expect Hikaru to play rook f8, rook g7 check, rook f7, and oh wait, he goes for rook into h2 check. I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that coming. Rook into h2, king into h2, bishop into f4. Queen h4 check is the threat with the idea of queen into g3, and white has to find a defense against that with limited time. He has to probably go king to h3, but then there's queen h6 check, king g2, bishop into g3. This looks totally winning for Hikaru. The computer shows a much lesser value of minus 0.5, but it's not so clear, guys. It's not so clear. Maybe rook e1 check, king d6, and there is something here for white, but it's totally not clear how white manages to defend here against this deadly threat of queen h4 check. The only move that I can repeatedly think of is king h3, but then there's queen h6 check, king g2, bishop into g3, king into g3, and maybe now there's no rook g8 check. So this is why their value is a bit less than what I would expect it to. Because without rook g8 check, black is not finishing off white. In that case, Jeffrey really has to go. He has to, just play king h3 and he has to make a move. Getting into this 30-second zone with 2 seconds increment against Hikaru is asking for disaster. It's like setting yourself for a last ride with the Undertaker, and he has played king h3, but Hikaru is in that finisher zone now. White has only 20 seconds. Hikaru was down momentarily on time for a few moves, but he's back there in that position where he's setting up his finisher. He has 2 minutes more. White's king is in the center. He can go queen h6 check, king g2, bishop into g3, king into g3, and continuous checks with queen e3 check. At the very least, he's not the one getting checked. And yeah, he goes for it, queen h6, king g2, bishop into g3, king into g3 on the board. I expect some queen e3 check here or queen more checks from the queen. He just takes bishop b into c6. So the point is, after rook e1 check, king d6, white doesn't have any move checks. So now it's white's turn to move, and he'll have to think and come up with a move. And he has only 20 seconds to do that. And any kind of endgames is set to favor black because he's up by a pawn. So a 4 versus 3 endgame. Here the pawns are not on the same side. He goes with the king to f8. The king is completely safe here. Very understandable reaction from him. Queen c4 with the idea of queen c5 check, getting the queen into the enemy's zone. Queen d6, a check, and protecting the king. The drawback is this rook is slower to get into the game. So it's going to take much longer for this rook d8. And I think Jeffrey is going to hold this because even though he has limited time, the black's king is also not safe. And he's going to be able to try and push this game into a draw position. Rook e6, queen into d3, queen into d3, rook into d3, king f4, rook into a3. Then white will take this pawn, white will take the f5 pawn, the b and the a pawn will get traded, and finally only this h7 pawn will remain. So if there's a queen trade, there's going to be a draw. If black refuses to trade the queen, then rook f6 check, queen f7 check, and all these problems. Yeah. So the queens have been traded, and the c6 pawn is set to fall. Hikaru can prolong the game by defending the c6 pawn, but then the f5 pawn would fall. H7 pawn, the lone survivor, and if rook into a3, then after rook into c6, this f5 pawn is said to be captured the very next move. The a6 pawn is yeah, rook c3, king into f5. He might play some king f7 here and try and prolong the game, but rook h6, king g7, rook. Oh, wait. He goes towards these pawns. He's protecting the c6 pawn. Okay, this makes sense, but Jeffrey is having none of it. Plays king e5, and they have agreed for a draw. So, guys, the rapid game between Jeffrey and Hikaru has ended in a draw. So we move into the blitz territory, the 3+2 portion, and that is set to begin at any moment. Hikaru will have the white pieces in the blitz game. If that also ends in a draw, we will go into the bullet portion, which is 1+1. With increment, makes a lot of difference between increment and non-increment. So these games start pretty quickly. There is not a lot of time difference, and there we have the game has begun. Hikaru going for his usual knight f3, 3 b3 here, the English opening, and he's gone with his pawn on d4. At the highest level, this opening is pretty well neutralized when black has a lot of time. But when you catch the opponent and they are not, they don't recall their opening instantly, their preparation, then it becomes a pretty viable option. So this is a great opening to have in your repertoire in the speed chess games. C takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop d7. The bishop goes to e2, rook c8. This knight potentially going to, okay, the knight goes to d2 because he wants to protect the h2 pawn from f3. The bishop going to b8 because h2 is a potential weakness for black to strike, and the rook goes to c1. This is an even position because although black has this isolated queen pawn, an isolated pawn is basically a pawn with no pawns on the adjacent files. And when you have no pawns on the adjacent files, this pawn cannot be protected by another pawn. So although black has an isolated queen pawn, which are generally regarded as weaknesses, he gets a lot of activity. And there we see all of black's pieces moving forward with every move. So knight e4, knight into e4, d into e4. The isolated pawn is traded, but on the other hand, white has also traded a few pieces, which helps him distinguish the initiative of black a bit. Knight into c6, bishop into c6. Hikaru is going for the simple questions. He loves to have these questions where he can just increase his advantage minimally without having any risk, without having any complexity. He can play these types of questions by hand, literally. Of course, we make every move by hand. So the what the expression means is that the hand can do the job without the brain instructing it, without having to really think about it, not having any complex decisions to make. And Hikaru knows these types of questions so well, and this knight of 3 e3 c4 b3, the system, the structure is kind of his go-to opening. This is what he played when he played against Nihal Sarin the first ever time in India, in Kolkata, the Tata Steel Blitz Championship. And if Hikaru plays against a random unknown opponent who he has no idea what they're going to come up with, this is likely the opening that he would go with. And he's increasing his advantage little by little. This rook coming on the d file, he has this pressure on the d file, which is relevant. Black's initiative has been completely repelled away. He has no attack out here on the king side. With g3, bishop g2 is a threat. The e4 pawn could be potentially attacked. Bishop g2, and if something like f5, then there's queen d5 check, queen c4 check, queen into e7, all these different possibilities. And this also kind of plays against Chong, who loves activity, who likes to, bring his pieces out, get initiative against the opposition king. In fact, Jeffrey Chong had knocked out with in one of the quarterfinals in the second time or the second attempt of Vidits. And he did that by mating with his Nakamura. He didn't meet with it, but he won that game in like 2021 moves and had a great attack against Vidit's king. Jeffrey is also the opponent who lost against Vidit in the World Cup in Sochi last year. And this is clearly his signature, his style. He likes to get his attack going. And he has managed to whip up something here, h4. And White will soon have one pawn cover less on the king side. But Hikaru set up this clever trap with queen a4, eyeing this e8 rook. So after rook into d6, rook into d6, bishop a3, there is a spin, and more of the pieces get traded. And finally, this e4 pawn will be left lonely and vulnerable and easily captured. This was a very clever move by Hikaru, queen e4. And I really don't think Jeffrey saw this rook into d6 coming. He, you'd think, okay, so Hikaru's made this move, so why didn't Chong think and find his opponent's intention and save it? And I think the answer is on to the left of the screen. Look at the amount of time Hikaru has. He has close to 2 minutes, and his opponent was already having less than a minute. So he was under that kind of pressure where he had to spend like 1 or 2 seconds per move in order to not get into that zone of time trouble where he's under 30 seconds. So to avoid from going into the frying pan, he had to jump into the fire, and either way, he's getting roasted. This is the pressure that he had. Hikaru keeps creating against his opponents. Bishop d7 on the board, queen into a7. He has captured this pawn. This bishop will probably go to f1, I guess, because you don't want to, you don't want to imprison that bishop against the e4 pawn. And this pawn is hanging. After h3, this file is closed permanently, so a lot of kingside activities. Oh, now there's rook into c6. There's rook into c6 on the board. So again, the pressure creating another blunder from the opponent. Rook into c6, b into c6, queen into e7, rook into e7, bishop into d6, and it's game over. Yeah, there we have it. And now this bishop goes to c5. This pawn will go all the way to a6, protected by this bishop, and then to a7 as well. And this king cannot come out. This bishop blocks that. Rook a1 protects against. Oh wait, what? Why didn't you take this pawn? Because white has bishop into h3. So Jeffrey keeping this bishop under the pin, and he has protected this h3 pawn. So he's basically asking, how are you ever going to get this bishop out? Oh, he has unexpectedly resigned against the run of play, realizing that white can just go bishop b6, bishop a5, and it's game over. So he resigned, and Hikaru moves into the final, guys, waiting the winner of the match between Arjun Erigaisi and DMITRY ANDREIKIN. The semi-final between Arjun and ANDREIKIN is set to start any moment now. I expect about a 2 to 3 minute break between this game and that game, and we'll be back with the Arjun and DMITRY ANDREIKIN game. But before that, we'll go into a short break.
Congrats on the very exciting win there. Yeah, I'm, by the way, chess correspondent Spenny Thompson here. That was a very, very tense endgame with queens on the board and open position. Do you find that to be more nerve-wracking, or a game with many, many pieces on the board?
I think after I got d5, I was pretty happy. Earlier, I felt maybe instead of king g6, he could have been more precise. I don't know how exactly, but earlier my queen was kind of awkward and he could create some threats with h5 g4 or h5 h4. But after I got this d5, the queen endgame, I think I had a pretty decent chance. Okay. He allowed me to play queen d4, But even if not for that, let's say he went king f7, I think I can take on a4, and it's still pretty good, and I should be winning there.
Do you think you were winning the pawn endgame the whole time, or were there moments where
Yeah, I
Sarana might
think
have
I
had a
was
draw?
winning the pawn and the whole time after queen d4. Although the material count was even, his extra pawn doesn't really count on the a file, and my extra pawn, I just have connected passes here. So.
Right, right. Well,
Welcome back, everyone, to the semi-finals of the Rapid Chess Championship. We are back for the match between Arjun Erigaisi against Dmitry Andreikin. For those who don't know, Dmitry Andreikin is a grandmaster rated about 2700. He has a peak rating of 2743, and as of May 2022, he's ranked number 21 in the world. So he's right up there in the elite. He's one of the best players in the world, and he has played in the candidates before. Arjun's match starts in just 2 minutes, guys. So while you wait, do hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and let's get those numbers going. Let's get the support for Arjun going as the match begins. Before the match begins, Arjun will. I expect Arjun will have the black pieces because he played with the white pieces against Alexey Sarana. But yeah, so Andreikin also played black in his last game. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm not entirely sure if that's how it works or it works based on the rankings in which they finished in the qualifiers. But in any case, I think it should be Andreikin with the white pieces. Meanwhile, Hikaru has won his semi-final match, and he will face the winner of this match in the final, whoever it is. So, chat, what do you guys think? What are the chances of Arjun in reaching the finals of this Rapid Chess Championship of this week? And what do you think is the chances of Arjun winning this tournament overall? Do let us know in the chat while we await the match starting. Arjun looking bored. I'm also looking a bit bored at the moment, just waiting for the match to begin. Meanwhile, Andreikin looks pretty focused, and the game has begun, guys. The game has begun. It started with knight f3. Andreikin finished number 2 in the qualifiers. Arjun finished number 3. So Andreikin starts with the white pieces. That's your incentive for finishing higher in the qualifiers. And the match has begun. And this is the position we have after 7 moves. Pretty unambitious setup by the white pieces with the kings in an attack of the ready system, and a very nice center for Arjun out here. But on the other hand, Arjun is the one who's thinking first after the opening. He goes knight c6. Now, there's a bit of danger in these types of questions. It looks all innocuous, but sometimes there is a c4 break, and white tends to get a slightly better symmetrical position. So Arjun was probably guarding towards that as he played knight c6, knight c3, and now the pawn to e6. So white's only break here is e4, and we can go into this. We could potentially go into this 3 versus 2 endgame. 3 versus 2 on the queen side. Black will have these 4 pawns, but 4 versus 3 on the king side. But white will not mind that, because the less pawns there are on the king side, the easier it is to create a passed pawn. And if you guys watch the Arjun versus Sarana match, you will know the deadly effect of that passed pawn, how it brings you points, how it brings you wins. So e6 on the board, and Andreikin in for a long think. It's only the ninth move. These players have spent almost, Arjun has spent like around half a minute. Andreikin has spent more than a minute. If we count the increment, the 2 seconds increment, it's 10 minutes plus 2 seconds, guys. So if we count that, it's 2 seconds increment, and he goes bishop e3, which looks super strange. Potentially to put this bishop on c5, and but then what? Where does the bishop go after a b6? Does the bishop go to a3? But why would he put it there? It just looks strange. Bishop e3 is a strange move. Short castle. I'm also a bit surprised at how long Arjun is taking to play this short castle. Short castle, bishop c5, rook e8, and later e4. And it might not be easy to move this bishop or move these pieces from the queen side. It might come under potential pressure. But on the other hand, black has counterplay. For example, let's say short castle, bishop c5, rook e8, and something like e4 is not easy for white to execute, because in the end this b2 pawn is hanging. So bishop into e4, bishop into b2, and black just wins a pawn. So it's not going to be that easy for white to get this e4 as well. So I'm a bit surprised at why Arjun is spending so much time to just play short castle. Arjun played super fast and super confident in his previous match against Sarana, but here he's spending a bit of time in the opening, which could be potentially because he has a high respect for his opponent, Dmitry Andreikin, who, again, as I mentioned, has a good personal record, good score against Arjun Erigaisi. So a4 on the board with the idea of a5. I think black should play b6 at some point, but that's the reason why white played a4 as well. a4, b6, a5, and there can be a potential weakness on the queen side. So this is exactly why white played a4, but Arjun goes b6 anyway, probably intending to meet a5 with just a capture, or perhaps a better way. Queen c1 played by white with the idea of bishop h6. Again, this is strange play by Andreikin. It's really strange. Rook d1, rook c8 maybe, or queen to e7, just to keep this rook out here for against a potential a5. Queen c7 is also an option. Andreikin not revealing his cards. He has all these threats open: bishop h6, a5, e4. He has positioned his pieces in such a way that he's going to execute his threats in just one move, but he's not going to reveal which side he's going to execute it on. He's keeping his options open. He's keeping his cards open on all sides. So this is making Arjun think a lot, because there is no direct threat to defend against, and he has to defend on so many different sides. But the point is, Arjun has a nice position, so it allows him some room for counter attack, and he goes for knight g4, getting his piece out. potentially the knight goes to c4 in a couple of moves, and the queen on c8. This knight can come to e5, c4, knight b4, and he has all these possibilities. He has all these potential ideas. So at the moment, I think black has a pretty nice question. The evaluation bar getting a bit excited, but I think it's not much to get excited about. Queen c8 also the idea is to get some. Yeah, e4 was the move that I expected white to play, but I thought e4 black can just defend with d4, and after knight b5 again you see the usefulness of a move like a4. It uh, threatened a5. It facilitates knight to b5, and if black takes d into e4, then white opens up the position in a very favorable way. He set this all up with queen c1, the rook coming to d1, and this pawn a4. It started with this bishop e3. It all looked super strange. It didn't. It wasn't immediately apparent what Andreikin was up to, but now things are unraveling. Now it's becoming clear, and it's becoming clear at a time when it's too late for Arjun to react against that. That has been the strength of White's play so far. So Arjun trying to counter attack, he went for d4, the knight moved to b5, and now he has the pawn on h6 attacking the bishop. The bishop probably will go back to d2, and on all other places it was getting hit by one of the black pawns. So it goes all the way to d2, but now black has the threat of h3 or f3 to deal with, and the h6 pawn will be hit. So Arjun probably has to play something like h5 here or g5. But on the other hand, the d4 pawn is also in trouble. So Arjun under tremendous pressure here. It looks like he's about to lose a pawn by force. And once again, we are in this situation where one of the sides is worse defending, and the other side is exerting pressure. And it's a question of whether he's able to convert it or if it will be the opposite. Now, the previous time we had this situation in the Hikaru Chong match, Hikaru was able to defend successfully when he was worse and convert successfully when he was better. And that's how he won that match in the semifinal. Not an accident, guys. This is what this all the skill comes down to. It's a question of skill, and Hikaru does it better than most other people. And I say most because Magnus Carlsen exists, and uh, perhaps Ali Reza, Magnus Carlsen. These are, I think, the only two names that can compete against Hikaru in a format like this, speeches format. Arjun goes h3, sorry h5, but White has h3, and the d4 pawn will hang. So h3, knight e5, knight into d4, knight into d4, knight into d4, knight c4, c3, and White will just be a pawn up and keep that pawn. Andreikin goes for h3, and Arjun is not only down on time, but he's also down in position. Guys, let's get those likes going. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let's get those support going for Arjun. The best we can do and try and send some positive energy in. Arjun looks in great danger. The knight has basically only two squares, knight to e5 and knight to f6. Both of them look bad. Knight goes to e5, knight into d4, knight into d4, knight into d4. And at least there is some counterplay out there. Knight f6, I don't really see much after knight into d4, knight into d4, knight into d4. I just don't see any counterplay, and White has some extra options like e5. So I'm curious again why Arjun is really spending time here, because he has only one decent move out here, and it makes sense to play it instantly because time is also a very, very important factor. Arjun going on a long, long thing. I really don't understand what he's thinking about here. It's baffling to me. Can you really play anything other than knight e5 here? Is there really an option? Or is Arjun really just cursing himself for his play earlier? Again, this is a very dangerous psychological tendency when you pass and curse yourself on how you play the earlier phase of the game badly. Potentially, what Arjun is thinking about is how to continue after this point. But then your opponent might not even make that move. So why do you spend so much time earlier? Why do you spend like 2 minutes on h5, knight e5 when they are the only moves. Easy to say. When we are in that situation, probably I would do the same. I would probably again curse myself for getting into a bad position. But he really had to uh, play faster, I think, in that situation, which is what again something Hikaru did amazingly. We saw him do that against Jeffrey Chong in the semifinal just now. He got into a bad situation, but he just kept making moves as if it was just a normal part of the game. But Arjun, on the other hand, playing so uncharacteristically slowly here. The time's already passed, I think, for uh, taking such a long time. But it's also not easy to suggest a move. He goes bishop to h6, queen into h6, knight c4. A bit of a desperation there. This looks super scary for Arjun because there are options like this knight coming to d4, and then after that knight f3 and knight g5. But Arjun really doesn't want to lose a pawn, so he's hanging on with all his might. But guys, I do expect to see an end to this match, which we perhaps don't want it to happen, because I don't think Arjun saw his idea of knight f3, knight g5, and it's basically game over if that happens. Arjun is thinking right now. He's thinking. He's probably he just realized that White has this knight f3, knight g5, but again, it's a bit too late for that, and he really had to play something faster at this point. But it was also not easy to come up with a knight into d4 on the board. White will take knight into d4 back now, and then this knight goes to f3 and g5. So black has to prevent that first, perhaps bring his knight back, but then it's a pawn down and all these weaknesses. He goes for knight into b2, probably out of desperation, but I don't see how he defends after knight f3 and g5. This looks completely lost. And Andreikin reaching for a bottle of Coke, patiently taking a sip, knowing that if he calculates this, it's game over. You can also see it on Arjun's face. He can, I don't know if you can see it, but I see knight f3 written all over his face, twitching his fingers, but that's not really going to help his position in any way at all. Knight f3, knight g5, the deadly threat, and knight f3 is on the board by Andreikin. And the position is pretty much resignable for Arjun. There's really no defense out, because after f6, there is a queen into g6 check, queen into h5 check. The whole king side gets destroyed. And if he doesn't play f6, then there's no way to defend against the checkmate, knight g5 and queen h7. This has been an amazing game by Andreikin, by the way. He really played in a way that I did not understand at all. It looked strange to me, but the ideas were unraveled slowly and steadily at a time where it was too late to defend against them. And now Arjun attacks the rook with rook d8, but White just ignores it and just goes knight g5, queen h7 check, incoming, queen h8 check, and if you defend with queen c7, then queen h7 checking, if it knight into e6 check, wins the game. So Arjun goes rook into d1, rook into d1, and queen to e8, a last ditch defensive attempt. But at the very least, White can just win this piece with queen h7, queen h8, queen into b2, which is what I think will happen in a few seconds, and I expect Arjun to resign the game because it's just a hopeless position. A piece down, the king in the center, and this is not a position where Andreikin would lose, I think, even against Stockfish or not convert. Andreikin goes for e5. He doesn't want the piece. He wants something even more. Knight e4, knight f6. He just wants checkmate. He just wants a king. Knight e4, knight f6. What a strong move this e5 is. And now after knight e4, black has no defense. It's mate, guys. It's checkmate. Knight e4, knight f6. Or do you go knight to h7? I think either way, it's pretty much the same. But oh yeah, there is a defense with f5, knight f6, check king f7. But the queen is lost, and maybe more. Bishop to c6. Okay, how many wins are there in this position for white? Queen e7, it's queen h7, queen h8 mate. And if the queen goes to f8, it's queen h7, checkmate in one. So bishop c6, bishop into e8, queen h7. This is also lost. There's really no way anyone can defend this position in the world with the black pieces. So I guess that Arjun's campaign this week of Rapid Chess. It was a great attempt by Arjun, an amazing performance, reaching the semi-final only for the second time by an only the second time by an Indian player. First one being Vidit Gujarati, and there we go. Arjun has resigned that game, guys. So Arjun has lost that semi-final. But what an amazing performance by Arjun. He played fabulously well. He reached the semi-final only for the second time. The first one was with it. He lost against Hikaru in the previous week, and we have Arjun this time. And with the Rapid Chess Championship opened up, previously it was open only to the top 100 grandmasters, but now it's opened up to all the grandmasters in the world. I expect a lot more Indians to participate. We have the biggest GM base, I think, active base in India, in the world. And a lot of Indian grandmasters are going to participate, and a lot more of them are going to reach till the knockout phase. So this was the Rapid Chess Championship this week. But don't go anywhere. We have the Junior Speed Chess Championship match tomorrow between Arjun Erigaisi and Mohammad Murali at 9:30 p.m. I'll be back to commentate on that as well tomorrow, guys, after another fascinating day at the camp here. And if Arjun manages to win that, then we'll have more of the matches in the following days itself. So a lot of matches coming up. Nihal has reached the final of Junior Speed Chess Championship. Arjun will play the quarterfinals tomorrow. If he wins, he moves on to the semifinals, and we could potentially see Arjun versus Nihal final in the JSCC as well. So stay tuned. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, so you get those updates instantly, and you can tune in and do like the stream. So we have more people coming in. That's it for this week of Rapid Chess. Thank you so much for tuning in, and see you all tomorrow for the Junior Speed Chess Championship, guys. Bye bye.